everyone. Welcome to the 3-on-1 podcast. I'm your host, Matt Ryan, joined, as always, by my quarterback. You know him, you love him, Cory Hammond, and multiple-time A7FL champion, certified Hall of Famer, Big Rob Fabien. Gentlemen, we are heading into the first bye week of our A7FL season, as unlike other football leagues, we run into the holidays. So we will be taking this coming Sunday off, but we will be giving you our top 10. But before we go into that and dive deeply into week 2 of the A7FL season, we have something that we debuted last week. If you listened to the 3-on-1 podcast, you didn't get this. This was only for our YouTube viewers and viewers on DAZN. Ryan DePaul gave us a 3-on-1 editorial. Before we decided to record tonight, another member of our team decided to write and get approved a 3-on-1 editorial. As I am the editor-in-chief of this program, I needed to review it and make sure that it was done. Now, with the second ever 3-on-1 editorial, Cory Hammond.
Thank you, Matt. And thank you, audience. But most importantly, thank you and congratulations to the Rawway Snow Tribe for their first victory of the season. And let's check out this Instagram post. The tagline here, if you're watching on the 3-on-1 podcast, Mr. Hammond can't make the cut again. And in our game, week 2, the Boston Omegas took on the Snow Tribe, and they did win emphatically, 51-6. In fact, let it be known to the A7FL world that in my last 4 games, I've lost by a combined score of 202-24. I know, right, Rob? So why the shade after they cut me? Why do they care? Maybe it's because they are still trying to prove themselves right, even to members of their own organization. And maybe also because of this. Now, one low light out of context does not take away from an otherwise great performance by J. Keels, who was 3 for 8, 53 yards, 2 touchdowns, an interception, 8 attempts rushing for 129 yards and a touchdown. But yeah, if you're listening to us wherever podcasts are sold and not watching on a7fl.tv or our YouTube channel, check out the video of our film of that game, timestamp 3:33, if you're that concerned. Guys on the Snow Tribe were. And we can all agree that Jamal Williams is much more talented than my old ass. But there's still this. Again, Jamal only attempted 1 pass, a 40-yard touchdown to Eddie Pettiot, and he only had the 2 runs, whatever it is, and a 40-yard touchdown himself. And he's also working to become a Marine. Definitely a better man than me, and definitely a better athlete. But the better choice? And in that Instagram post again, you could see it, the @Snow Tribe Instagram or Snapface or whatever. And check out their sponsor, Azuna, the antimicrobial odor blocker if your feet stank like theirs. But you can see me after the sack that they posted here in this play that you're witnessing. But this is how I got up and responded the next play. Later in the game, on a 4th and 8, the situational play type that the Snow Tribe most struggled with last year and so far this year, actually the exact situation that occurred against the U on their first drive, when they were featuring the snowplow, and they put Keels in an impossible situation to come bail them out, fresh off the sideline with no rhythm. I complete the pass, move the chains, and do the job to my guy, Euro Kenyatta, no less, a guy who they didn't even want on their team that I would happily take, who had 9 receptions for 100 yards Sunday, against a corner that played his college ball in the Big 12. Maybe I didn't make the cut, Snow Tribe, but you guys did call me back. And you guys are the ones that are still talking about it. Just to be clear, I play for the Omegas. And good luck next week, because I went 20 for 37, 217 yards against you guys. What's Huff going to do? Matt, Rob?
I don't know.
No, I'm just saying, Matt, Rob, back to you in the studio.
Editorial from Cory Hammond. I was about to cut it off like 3 times. You'll see it on the video, me just talking like this, but we had to let our boy cook, and well, he wasn't wrong. Let's go into the top 10, because at least one of those teams mentioned are in our top 10. We are going to cut to the quick with it this week. We're going to show you the top 10, and we're going to break through it real quick. We got ghosts in there, Rob? What's going on over there?
And unfortunately, Joey Bate, Woody Ness Charles, if you're listening to this wherever podcasts are sold, Matt was saying, are there ghosts in there to Rob who's shaking stuff away? He wasn't necessarily talking about the top 10.
The ghosts, yeah, nah, definitely not talking about the ghosts.
But shout out to Joey Bate for having a cool-ass highlight despite losing last week. And we'll go through the scores and talk about some of our thoughts of some of those games. That'll be the primary focus of this week's pod. We'll dive deep into week 3 next week on the show, as it's a holiday week, and I'm very tired. Let's go to the top 10. No real surprise here at the top of our list. The BIC number 1 in the unofficial A7FL top 10. The Patterson U, after defeating the DC Buzz, are at number 2, moving up 1 spot. For the first time in the A7FL 3-on-1 top 10, a Las Vegas team is at number 3, Rob. The Insomniacs taking the 3 spot after a defensive battle against the Renegades, which was not what anybody thought heading into that game. The Silk City Animals move all the way up to number 4, being 2-0. All 4 teams at the top of this list are undefeated. But all 4 are 2-0. The Nightcrawlers are 1-0. They are in the 5 spot after defeating the Ghosts 40-14. At number 6, after falling to the BIC, and you can watch that back now in an A7FL fast forward on our YouTube channel, the Baltimore Watchmen at number 6. And that's not an indictment of their talent. It's just they lost. They lost by a decent margin. And they're still in the top 10. They're still in the top 6. They're in the top, just right under the first half, because those other teams are undefeated. That's, in my opinion, the crux of that. But we move to number 7, the Sick With It, moving up a bunch of spots to the 7th spot. Making their first ever appearance on the top 10 are the 2-0 North Vegas Kryptonite, after defeating the Hunters in our 3rd game of the week. In the 9th spot, still undefeated, still on this list, but in the 9th spot because they were unable to play this week, but we can't penalize them because the game was postponed until May due to reasons beyond the team's control. The Sin City Chaos. And at number 10, the Vegas Fosses, after the Sick With It got the win on Sunday at Bonanza High School. Let's run through this top 10. We had a very long conversation via text on Monday night that turned into a 45-minute to an hour phone call. The top 4, I would say, were unanimous. 5 and 6 were a conversation. 7 through 10 were an argument, and I won't say argument in a negative sense, but more of an evaluation where we are with the limited sample size we have 2 weeks into the season. And it is what we're doing, in a sense, isn't fair, because lists like this aren't inherently fair to begin with, because these are variables that are not a constant. The only thing that is a constant is that these teams play football. Everything else is at the will of weather, which we saw in the Renegades and Animals game, because it was 25 to 30 mile per hour winds the night after a tornado warning down on the Jersey Shore. The BIC getting the win against the Watchmen in a game that all three of us thought the BIC were going to win, but we came out of that one as impressed with the Watchmen, despite giving up the win and walking out of that game with their first and possibly their only loss on the season.
And what was
the
interesting,
Patterson go ahead, Corey.
What was interesting,
go ahead.
It felt like as we were talking about it last night, the more we would argue with points for one team, the argument in favor of one team would be the counterpoint argument against another team. So, for instance, we were talking about the U and the Insomniacs, like who do you put above them? Well, the Insomniacs have the Sick With It win, but the Sick With It win was, nothing until the Sick With It beat the Force. And then who did the Force beat? The Force beat the Pit Bosses, but lost to Sick With It. So when we were talking about the U, the U only really played, and no disrespect, that they played teams that didn't necessarily live up to the top 10, standards. But guess what? They handled both of those games. They won pretty convincingly in both of those games. And even though we were saying stuff like, well, the Insomniacs have a better win against Sick With It, that was only by a few points. So when we're looking at and trying to do these metrics after week 2, and I think that was, Rob, that was your biggest point, is that after 2 weeks, it's near impossible to try to do anything other than give teams credit for the teams that they've played and what they've done, and then try to assess based on the information that we have, knowing that in a couple of weeks, these are going to be a little bit more accurate to what the actual consensus would be around the league.
Exactly. And that was my main point always. It's just because we have such a small sample size, 2 games, just 2 games, the metrics to me have to be very specific this early, because later in the season is going to get a little wonky.
When we talk about things being wonky, we look at where we are right now. The Vegas Force are on the outside looking in of a playoff spot. The Sick With It as well. Both of those teams are 1-1. The Kryptonite and the Insomniacs are the only 2 teams without a loss in A7FL Nevada. And those 2 teams right now are the favorites to make it to the Western Conference semifinals and to the Western Conference finals in Cincinnati in July. On July 9th, we will be deciding who will be going to the A7FL championship game heading into Vegas.
So just for fans that aren't aware, and maybe myself, how many teams from the Vegas division actually face off to decide who the Vegas division champ is?
Well, let me pull up my playoff schedule here. But I got to throwing me through a loop here, Corey.
Honestly, the way you just rolled it off about those the way that the playoff situation, I didn't mean to put you in the spotlight.
So right now there will be 2 teams in the divisional Final Four from Las Vegas.
Okay.
So right now, if we were playing knockout rules, both the teams that would make it are the Kryptonite and the Insomniacs, because they're both undefeated.
So only the top 2 regular season record finishers in the Vegas divisions get a chance to face the 2 from the LA. California division.
Yes.
So that means that one of these 3 teams that we just put into the top 10 is actually going to be not just OLI week to week on the top 10 potentially, but outside looking into even a chance at the playoffs. So, as the weeks trek on, that second spot, that first spot's going to be huge, especially for Vegas, because there's 8 teams fighting for those 2 spots. And I think there's at least 3 of them that could be in the running for them right now.
So there's no bye weeks for the top 1 and 2, then the divisional, none of that. It's just these top 2
The divisional Final Four will take place on June 11th.
Mm-hmm.
Then it'll be the division championships, which will basically be the best teams from Vegas and LA. They play a Final Four. Then those 2 teams will play. Same thing with Ohio. They'll play a knockout round. And then the same thing for Florida and the same thing for the Northeastern Division.
So everyone gets a knockout round.
Yes.
So 1 and 2 get a bye week. 3 versus 5, 4 versus 6.
No, it'll be 1 versus 4, 2 versus 3. So the
Oh,
Northeast.
so that week before,
So like,
that you
go
get
ahead,
what I'm
go
asking?
ahead.
That week before, right? There's no wild card round.
Give me one. There is a wild card round. There is a
Okay.
wild card round. That'll take place the final week of the season. So the week after Memorial Day is when
Okay.
we'll have our wild card round.
Nice.
See which teams will make it in. And then from there, it'll be the divisional final 4, where the 4 best teams from the Northeast will play each other.
Okay.
And the 4 best teams from Vegas and LA and Ohio will decide on divisional champion for the national quarterfinals, the national semifinals, pardon me.
Okay.
And then on June 25th, we'll see the top 2 teams from the Northeast play, which right now would be the BIC and the Animals.
Oh, indeed.
Based on record, yeah.
Indeed.
Based on record. It's based on record. So it would be the Animals and the BIC.
Wow.
Or the U doesn't the U have a better point differential? Because they're 2-0 too.
Think so. Because they got to think
Oh,
about
yes.
Yeah. Shutout. Animals had a shutout.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, but that's only
yeah,
7.
So,
yeah, but that's only a 7-point differential. But they did play the Omegas, so I forgot about that
that's kind
amount. Yeah,
so
I
they've
forgot
only
about that
allowed
amount.
about
yeah,
6 or 7
technically the
points.
Animals are the top team in the Eastern Conference right now.
Holy
for all intents and purposes, because they have 53 net points.
But I mean,
you can
realistically,
head on.
Go ahead.
Head on over to a7fl.com/standings. You can take a look at that with us right now. But technically, the Kryptonite are the top seed in the West. The Insomniacs are 2 because the Kryptonite have scored more points.
And shout out to Darnell Richardson, who has been on a mission now. He's going to have some tougher games later on in the season, and we're going to see if he can keep that number 2 spot. But I'm glad to see the Kryptonite in there and Lex Luthor, the supervillain, in there into the top 10 for the first time. Rob, what's your biggest either surprise or gripe about the top 10, do you think?
I mean, I think we made it very clear during our debate.
I remember.
Yeah, it was more of a debate because, again, I think friends don't argue, right? Because I don't think it was an argument. I don't agree with the top 10 from 5 to 10, probably.
Well, just give us your opinion then, because I don't think you were wrong. I don't think we were right. I think it's interesting if the league gets both sides of it.
Right. It's just because we have such a small sample size, like we said earlier, the metric on which we're actually placing guys in the top 10 is a little rough, because for me, it's always about record, right? And when record becomes the issue, everybody's 2-0. And then based off the eye test of what we see, we know which teams kind of go where. But as Matt kind of just said, if we're going by net points, BIC is not even number 1. Which is honestly, go ahead, Matt.
So if we were looking at the points, the point totals right now, the Animals would play the Watchmen. The U would play the BIC in a Northeastern knockout round.
Okay.
In Vegas, it would be the Kryptonite playing the Siquidit and the Insomniacs playing the Force.
Okay. Because the
national, and I have to say, we've talked about the West's path to a championship game. That is not an easy task for the Kryptonite or the Force to get through the Insomniacs for the Force, and for the Kryptonite to get through the Siquidit.
Right.
I think that those are tough challenges. And I'm not going to knock Darnell Richardson. I'm not going to knock the coaching of the Force. But if it does not come down to, in my opinion, the Insomniacs and the Sin City Chaos in the Western Conference Championship, I will be very surprised.
Well, let's also be fair to the trends out in Nevada, because they've been setting a lot of trends. They're setting the trend that the fall is back in vogue. They're setting trends on, where we're playing games, but they're also setting trends on is that the team that thinks they're the best out there for whatever reason and is vocal about it they've been getting some comeuppance or whatever we want to call it. So, the Force, after their pit boss win, I was a little leery because it's almost, the thing. So let's just hope the Insomniacs remember, because both Scooter, Trey, and Munchie, who played quarterback last weekend, all three of those guys have been part of those ups and downs, whether they were on the Kryptonite or the pit bosses in the fall, or now they're on the Insomniacs. They do look to be that Vegas All-Star team, but to be honest, even though I think they proved a lot, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a little bit of a carousel where, yeah, the Insomniacs be sick with it. But what if when the Insomniacs play the Kryptonite figure out a way? Maybe it's revenge, maybe it's something else. And then what happens when the Force beat the Kryptonite, because somehow maybe they have their number, and then we get this situation where it's a little bit muddied. But I'm just really excited to keep talking about that. There's a Vegas division in our league, Rob, and that, to be fair, they are putting out pretty good game film and some pretty good highlights to add to, our OG stuff that we got handled out here.
Indeed. And again, when net points actually right now, so just to be clear, the national top 10 is not considering net points. Nationally ranked, I guess BIC would be number one, but in the Northeast, based off of 2 freaking weeks of football.
Yeah, that's the unfair thing.
You know what I'm saying? That's the unfair thing that has the Animals that are the legit number one team in the Northeast.
Well,
so
let's talk about the Animals a little bit, because I think that one of the things that some of our league is going to miss out on is some of the extra juice that was going into the Animals Renegades game week 2, and the fact that it was the 10 a.m. game. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, I think that some of our audience wants to get a little bit more into detail about that matchup. Would you say yes or no? I think that would be fair.
I'd say yes.
Because it was a great game.
We can do a watch along of the game right now if we wanted to.
Shout outs to all of our staff here at A7FL.tv to make that even possible.
If that's what you guys want to do, we can watch the game right now.
It's already condensed to the 15 minutes, right?
It was probably the more controversial game out of all the games that were played.
Well, I think we could even just say it and then move on to something else. There's 3 things that happened in that game. There's the actual there's the buildup, the actual result, and I think the hidden story. And I was talking about this with Kenny Stansbury, and then Matt Ryan was in the background with some of the guys. I think it was David Soberman, our stat. Well, I shouldn't even say who he is. Everybody's out for our guy Dave, but Matt was like, "Yeah, look, this is what I have to deal with while I'm trying to set up games." Corey's trying to do another podcast, but when watching that game, Rob, and I was calling it to you on your drive in, but watching that game, the buildup was there was the talk between the quarterbacks. And they both had a lot to say, and they both said it proudly. And both of them are championship-winning quarterbacks in the A7FL. So they both had every right to do whatever they felt was right in the build-up to that game. But what was interesting, Rob, is that when it came down to it, although those Warriors both fought the elements, great rosters that they were facing, because I still respect the Renegades, even though they're 0-2. That was one of the things that we talked about in the top 10, and maybe we can elaborate on that after this. But what the stats and what the result will tell you is that the Renegades lost 7-0, and that Huff not only scored the touchdown, I think he threw it, but he had the 2 picks.
Right.
And with all the stuff that was being said in the lead up, that means a lot. And especially out of context, when we talk about that game, that Huff not only won the game on offense, but he had the 2 interceptions himself personally on defense.
He had the controversial interception that stopped the score. Then he had the game-sealing interception that pretty much ended the game, and a ton of.
It did end the game. It was literally the last play of the game, and that will be what the stats will show you. But Rob, you mentioned it. The Renegades on 4th and 17 had probably their best opportunity of the game, in which CP3 threw a jump ball to Dondre Haynes, and Dondre Haynes extended for it. So did Quattro Huffin, who jumped and grabbed it. And we're not going to get into the semantics of whether the call was right or wrong. But what I will say is that as much as we respect the Animals, putting them at number 4, as much as we respect BIC, once again, having them at number 1, the fact that the Renegades lost by 1 score to both the number 1 and the number 4 team, when they had a chance to maybe tie, maybe get close enough, maybe change some things with some of the things that happened late in the game for the Renegades, and obviously that play that decided it in the end zone that they called an interception. I would say that even though they're 0-2, I would be very leery of underestimating the Renegades, because not only did they lose and CP3 threw the 2 interceptions, which might be the story, they played a hell of a game against a team that we think is the 4th best team in the country.
100%. I don't disagree with the words you said. The Renegades, even me being there, because again, you were giving me the play-by-play on the ride there. Then I ran into Pedro, who was Pedro from the Snow Tribe, who was actually broadcasting it live, and I was giving a little pseudo announcing to that live.
Shout out to It's Dro. Check out his Twitch
Dro.
streaming. He's a good gamer and such.
Shouts to Dro. What I saw out there was a very talented team that just made a few mistakes. Liberty dropped a strike of a pass. CP3 put it on the money. Liberty dropped it. Breezy dropped a strike from CP3. So I'm watching this and thinking, man, the story's going to be CP3 sucks and Huff is just better because of the win. But it's like, you have to be there to really see that. CP3 was on the money with a lot of these throws. CP3 wasn't off the way people might think he's off. It's like these guys on the Renegades have to catch the ball. I asked Liberty, hey, bro, what happened? He said, yo, it's on me. Patted his chest. There's no other words after that. There's nothing you could say. He took accountability and just kept it pushing. But those are championship plays. Those are the plays that are going to make a difference 7 games down the line. When you remember, maybe that play would have changed the trajectory of where this team was going to go. And right now, they might be the best 0-2 team I've seen in a long time, to be honest with you. So I would just suggest that.
And does the road get harder or easier for them? Because Corey Price so far on the season he was 9 for 26 on Sunday, 158 yards, 2 touchdowns. He rushed for 4 yards, 44 yards, and he got a TD. Pardon me, that was week 1. He was 14. He was 5 for 14 on Sunday. So not necessarily great, and those are composite stats, and we'll get full stats on that on A7FL.com. But the road for the DC for the Rahway Snow Tribe isn't easy, and neither is it for the Renegades. The Renegades' path is the next 2 weeks are interesting matchups, because I think that's going to prove what this team actually is.
Well, and
going up against
in 2 weeks from now, they come down to Baltimore or DC to face.
They go down to DC to take the Buzz. Yeah, they face the Buzz in DC, and then they come back up here to play the Snow Tribe. Then they play the Omegas.
Okay. Let's X out the Omegas and talk about this 2-game spread that the Renegades have. Off the top of your head, if I ask you who would win between the Renegades and the DC Buzz with a healthy Mark Diggs or Cam Boogie at quarterback, there's no way you can give me a quick answer as to who would win.
No.
I also feel off the top of your head, if I said the same thing with the Snow Tribe, I don't think you can give me, without being biased, there's no way you can give me a quick answer, because what the Renegades are in 0-2, I've seen sparks of them that can possibly be better than the 1-1 Snow Tribe or the 0-2 DC Buzz. But the DC Buzz have faced the toughest 2 opponents anyone could have possibly faced this year.
Except for maybe the Renegades.
Right.
Exactly.
So now the Renegades have a 2-game slide where if they're unfocused, they can lose those games. If people decide
and
not
then
to
they
show
end
up,
the season against the Watchmen and the U. That's how they end their season.
To start off 0-2 and end off 0-2, that's tough.
Yeah, there's the best right now they can finish, in my opinion, is 3-4. Unless they catch the U or the Watchmen on a bad day, the high water mark for them is 1 game below 500.
Damn.
Well,
Isn't that what they were a year ago?
Well, I think that's the safe estimate, and I think it's likely. But I think if what they showed against BIC and the Animals, two teams that we have higher ranked than, at least the Watchmen right now, maybe they face these other teams that are going to be the tougher tests on their schedule. And look, I don't know, like you said, Rob, I don't know if we say that it's an easy decision, but I might say that the buzz with their questions at quarterback go into that Renegades game in 2 weeks as an underdog. And I think that even though the Snow Tribe got back on track with their win in week 2, I think that I think that in 2 weeks they face the Animals, if I'm not mistaken. So that win, that game against the Renegades might have to be a must-win situation for the Snow Tribe at that point, if they aren't able to pull it out against Huff and the Huffables. So for the Renegades, I mean, week to week, it's just test after test, really. And if we talk about iron sharpening iron, though, maybe by that point when they face a Watchman or they face the U, they've worked themselves into a rhythm where they can trust their defensive line to put pressure on those quarterbacks. And
but is it creating a false sense of expectation, though?
Because I think the
those
expectation
3
is
games
that
as
they're now
compared to the last 2 they play,
realistically, if they were going to go over 500, they probably needed, if you look at the schedule, they probably needed to beat the Animals.
Yeah.
But let's see how the rest of the season shakes out. And if they can get on the right track, Ryan DePaul will be the first to tell you that he loves the Renegades in their roster. But it just goes to show you how deep the Northeast is.
No, honestly, because they're floating right now. They're floating at 0-2. If they win the next 3 games, they'll be 3-2. But then that ultimate test in those next 3 games, you have to grow with your team to the point that you can have them match up well against the Watchmen, which I don't think is a far-fetched thing. I think they can match up with the Watchmen.
They were closer in points to BIC than the Watchmen were last week.
Indeed. So that tells me we actually touched on it a little bit. Is the Renegades problem that they either play up to their competition or down to their competition, which will always result in a loss because they'll never actually get past that competition? Because if they're better than a team, they'll play down. But if the team is better than them, they'll play up. And either way, it's a disadvantage for them.
Well, I think they have 3 weeks to kind of figure it out. But the first test, guys, last year after a 3-0 start from the 3-0, 3-0 start.
Yeah.
After a 3-0 start in Renegades, they beat me. Another situation, right, where I get destroyed. But they went and they played the DC Buzz feeling like great, awesome.
Yeah.
And it's a tough matchup to play the DC Buzz based on what they have, because if Mark Diggs plays, this style kind of negates one of their best attributes as a team. Now, I think Trey Baskerville's raised his level as a defensive end. I think that Dondre Haynes has only missed a step in some of those plays that I think he can get back in the offense. I don't think he's missed anything on defense. And as long as Malik can stay healthy, I think their defensive line can carry them. So it'll be interesting to see how their season progresses. But I think another interesting game to talk about, guys, is that Force Siquidit game. Because you talked about it, Matt. In the Vegas division, teams are going to start sorting themselves out. And a 21-14 win isn't emphatic. It's not, it's not dramatically, it's not like what we said the worst case scenario for the Force were, that they got blown out. But for a team that the entire offseason in the fall, and even the preseason when we got past the fall with the Jamboree, the Force were really confident that they were building in isolation. But now they finally face a team that isn't the Pitbulls. No disrespect to Coach Bartley, K Uno, and the shirt that I was wearing a couple weeks ago, but they cut me, so whatever. I think that what we've seen from the Force is that they got to get back on track, and they got to figure out, what They have to catch up to all the changes that have been happening around them as they've been isolated in a bubble.
Right. Right.
And how much of it is, oh, this sick with it team is something we don't know, and they have athletes who have played in this league before. That entire division is quixotic to me, because there's so many things that we've seen done out here that they're doing out there, but there's the teams that are the most consistent in how they operate as a team.
Well, first,
I think
before
we'll
we go any
better.
further, Matt, I know Rob knows, but can you tell me what quixotic means?
Weird, questionable, like you're questioning yourself.
Gotcha. Okay. So listen, we've had a pretty good show. I had to throw us off the rails a little bit there, but I think what we've been told from the people out in Vegas is that just trust the force, that they know what they're doing. And I think to a certain degree, I think we had to, right? By default, they won it out there. But the thing that's been happening out in Vegas is all of the extra games and attention and work that they've been putting in. I mean, Rob, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure that the guys that played in the fall, from the week 1 of the fall to the championship of the fall, got so much better at A7, not really necessarily at football. They're all the same football players, but they got that much more experience at A7, which is your point the whole time, that now they're out and playing the team that was the best team in Vegas and out A7ing them, probably, likely.
100%.
So look, shout outs to my guy, Lavish T. It's Jeremy Geary, I think, out there, the quarterback. He's balling out there. And you can't forget Darren Palmer going head top on somebody. But look, the Force have a tough game in 2 weeks against the Insomniacs. And if they want that belt, if they want that title this season, they better fix it in this bye week. And I think that they can. And even though Coach Mack thinks I'm a terrible journalist, I think he's a pretty good coach. And I'm excited to see what they do against the Insomniacs.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to see that matchup too. Let's go through the what, Rob? What? Rob, you had Rob face there, buddy.
I had a Rob face? No, nothing.
That's only for the A7FL.TV and YouTube fans. If you're watching us or listening to us wherever and DAZN, I always forget about DAZN. Sorry, DAZN. You guys are my favorite, honestly.
Shouts to my DAZN brother Anthony Joshua for the win. You feel me? We just gotta let it be known that's our guy right now. We're on the same network, buddy. Yeah.
That's just silly, right? Like that. Like we can acknowledge the fact that that's silly. That our rinky dink podcast and our broadcast of football are on the same platform as Canelo Alvarez and Anthony Joshua. That's ridiculous. That's silly. But things that are not silly, we were talking about it. Let's run through the scores from this week. The DC Buzz fell to the Patterson U 31-12. The BIC got the win 36-27 over the Watchmen. And in our third game, the Kryptonite sent the Hunters back into the desert on the Big Red Shark, 47-18. The Animals defeated the Renegades by the defensive score of 7-0. The Insomniacs defeated the Pit Bosses 49-6. The Over the Top got the 54-34 win against the Gold on Fox 5.2. A woohoo to the QC Crush, who defeated the Olatangi Volcanoes in a much closer than expected 31-24 game. The Heist and the Chaos will be playing on May 13th. The Sick with It barely beat out the Force 21-14. The Snow Tribe beat the Omegas, as stated at the top of the broadcast, 51-6. And the Nightcrawlers with Deontay Henderson and company defeating the Ghosts 40-18. Not a great week for defense in the league. But Trey Baskerville, a defensive standout. Tomeno from the BIC had an excellent week.
Yeah, Taj
first
is
time we really got to see
him. Who Kenny mentioned, he was the rookie on defense that he was talking about.
Right.
So we're gonna have to get used to that, the pronunciation of that last name. But I think a good question too is for you guys, who is your player of the week? Now, I think we talked about this in the group call a little bit, but there was a lot of great performances. And I think the first to mention as a potential honoree is our guy, Quattrell Huffin, who not only led the team on offense, but with those 2 picks, when you're just talking about stats, and for going 2-0 on the week, you know, that was a pretty impressive week for Huff, our guy at the QB of the Animals.
It's if we had to give a top players, I feel like you can't give it to one specific player.
Well, who else do you nominate?
I think
you can't.
I think we should all just pitch somebody in, because it's going to be very hard to pinpoint just one guy, because I saw some phenomenal performances.
I might just say like 6 or 7.
Well, let's do a top seven.
Shout out to Xavier Vinny, tight end, wide receiver, defensive back for the Boston Omegas. Not only did they have 8 receptions for 107 yards and a touchdown, but he also had the interception.
Who, Goose?
That's him. That's my guy. But go on.
Shout out Goose.
I had to derail the show. Why not? Look at my hat.
Huff is definitely up there. With a performance like his, again, there was only one score, sure. Whether it was 7 or 8, I'm not sure, but whatever that final score was, 7-0. Huff was responsible for that touchdown. Huff had at least 7 tackles in that game. Huff also had a few deflections on maybe the biggest tight end in the league, and he got an interception on the touchdown play and the game-ending play. To not mention him in a top player of the week is kind of insane.
Yeah, he was my first guy. So
so definitely Huff. And number 2, even though this is not in any specific order, but another guy I think we should definitely mention right out the gate is Ashanti Hollywood Worthy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, how could you not?
Shit. What a game! What a game! I mean,
he's our MVP candidate 2 weeks into the season. Like he's my MVP vote right now.
Now, in a game that I learned who Hefe was, because he was balling against BIC for a little bit, right?
Yeah, he was cooking.
Yeah.
It was almost like Hefe's performance for the Watchmen urged Ashanti on to be like, all right, hold my beer. And then all of a sudden, Ashanti does Ashanti things. That hook that he took back and forth, zigzag. What?
I loved your commentary on that, because you really told the kids, hey, you don't do this. You are not Ashanti Worthy. You're not Ashanti.
Do not try this at home.
These
are trained professionals here. It's like the Jackass opening screen, like now. You try.
And if we're talking about, go ahead.
Well, you try to do the Ashanti Worthy back and forth in youth football. Cram is going to be your middle name. So until you get to the level of Ashanti Worthy Hollywoodness, north and south, my young friends.
Talking about returners, Savion Cunningham had a great day for the OTT. Iquan Corsi had what many are calling the fastest 3-on-1 return in A7FL history.
For the Kryptonite,
right?
He shot a bullet up the field.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand what that means. Like, are we saying like he's that fast? Like he got from one side to the next?
No, from when he got the ball to when he got to the end zone.
It was almost like he was literally running a 65-yard dash. Like it was just catch as fast as you can, run straight to the end zone. There was no one in his way, apparently, also. But he was cooking straight, no hesitation, no huss, no regard for Big Rob's aspect of the highlight. He just said, I'm headed for 6. And he fooled me because I think he was wearing KJ Burrell's jersey.
Yeah, that makes sense. That the
right?
secret sauce.
Hey, you got to do what you got to do. But I think also, man, Darnell Richardson, I'm going to keep saying his name because he's now probably up to 7 touchdowns. You see the scores of him games, 50 plus, 47 plus. I can't wait till he has one of these top performances and the rest of the A7FL can see him on the games of the week. But unfortunately, I'll be probably working with my guys for the Omega, so I'll miss that call.
And another guy I definitely can't hesitate to mention, Tony Toe Tap.
Wow. Oh, my God. Marlon Anderson had himself a day.
Wow.
Same thing with Ricardo Freeman. Like, there were a lot of great players coming out of that game. OG Buck had a solid start. for the Watchmen.
Ooh,
Carlos Crosland had a
Crosland.
really solid first half.
Wow.
His first half was elite, and then his second half was just like, hey, I want to give Trey Loke a chance. Big Rob needs more Trey Loke in his life. No, but I mean, that's going to be the thing for the U, right? Is Carlos Crosland plays like that, they're likely not going to be able to be beaten. And for all the talk about the wind, let's just say that Carlos Crosland throwing the tight spiral with the arm that he has, he's had two of the nicest passes this season into that thing.
Honestly.
So is he replacing Huff? And we're confident that Huff is replaced. We'll know more after they play BIC. And no disrespect.
Again, you're going to be the only one from here on out, even in the last time we talked about it, that mentions Huff. We're not mentioning Huff. Huff is on the Huffables. There's nothing right now. The way things look to me, when I look at the U, I don't even think of Huff. Like,
I don't know. I'm a quarterback, so of course I'm going.
He's so entrenched in the DNA for this team.
For me,
but Crosland's done a great job stepping in,
and he's being himself. He's not being a Huff. You know, it's interesting because when we saw him before, we saw him for the Gators against, I think it was BIC, right? Or was it the U?
I'm gonna be honest with you. I've never watched a Carlos Crosland game and thought he was.
Well, the Carlos Crosland game that I remember specifically is when his name, you know, they gave us these sheets and this is my nickname. He says, I'm the GOAT. So he obviously has the confidence. And he went out there and he balled and he showed a lot of the same things. It's just obviously when you're taking on a defense like the defenses we're talking about, you know, you're not going to have the same statistical, you know, brilliance as when they were facing the DC Buzz. But
it'll be interesting next week. Yeah, next week it's going to be really interesting to see how Crosland responds to the BIC, to see how the U offensive line deal with that. Because can we really say that Crosland's faced a ton of pressure yet this season? And it's not an indictment on Crosland. No, it's more of the teams they play.
I will say the DC Buzz had the Gators defensive line guys. So Cal Bone and that core group did at times. Well, they did at times get a little bit of pressure on them, but it's not going to be anything like
offensive line. Yeah, it's not.
It's not going to be anything like what.
But even then, I'm gonna be honest with you. You're selling. Everyone's kind of selling that game short. That game is not just about matchups and D lines, and this is a 2022 championship rematch where guys from the U are still a little bit salty from that game, and BIC is still holding their nuts saying, ha, 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 we bust your ass three times in the regular season, and then we bust your ass in the chip. So it's like that game, my question is not if Crosland's ready to play the standard 7-on-7 football. Is he ready for that atmosphere of that
level
game?
Of championship level play? Yeah,
that game is not like, it's not going to be like any other game that you see.
And that's going to be
fire.
And you have a test the next 3 games.
Damn.
Because they take on after this game, they play the BIC next week. The week after that, they play the Watchmen in Jersey.
Damn.
Then they play the Animals.
Damn.
Then they play the Omegas and the Renegades.
All 3 of those games you mentioned were rival games, and here's why.
All 3 of those games are games of the week games too, so we will be getting those games right here on the Zone.
So the first game is BIC versus the U, which is again a championship rematch. There's tons of things to go back and forth about. The story is there. The very next game, you said it's the Watchmen versus the U. There's tons of Baltimore guys on that U team who had friends and guys that were supposed to be on the U leave the U to go to the Watchmen.
Yep.
That game is going to be intense.
And then to top it off,
they have to go against their former quarterback and a bunch of that's an inner city game where a bunch of those guys are still from Patterson.
And also those next 3 games are essentially knockout games.
They really are. That's a tough 3-game stretch, man.
Because if the best case scenario would probably be taking 2 out of the 3.
Right.
They're not going to sweep all 3.
Well, if they beat BIC, then they're the type of team that they
If they beat BIC, they're sweeping. For sure.
I mean, not definitely though.
No, for sure.
The matchup, I think the matchups, they could go different ways, but I think if they beat BIC next week, then the U team that is the 2023 U team is going to be a tough team to beat for those other teams, not the other way around.
They also might get bit by the schedule bug, because those 3 games, let's say they walk out of that and they take 2 games. They beat the Watchmen and they beat the Animals.
Okay.
So they're 4-1. That basically creates a must-win situation for the Animals and the Watchmen to fight for that 3 and 4 spot.
Oh, for
because
sure.
what happens after this, the Animals play the Snow Tribe next week. Then they play the Buzz. Then they get the BIC, they get the U and then the BIC, and then they end against the Omegas.
And
It's safe to say that we're in a situation where the Animals might walk out 5-2.
And the Animals don't play the Watchmen at all.
No, the Animals don't play the Watchmen. The only time they may play them is in the playoffs.
So then we'll have to go record. There's no head-to-head, and then net points. That's going to suck. Oh, my God.
And the Watchmen, their schedule the rest of the way is the Omegas, the U, the Buzz, the Renegades, and the Snow Tribe. So in terms of losses, they might lose to the U, but outside of that, they might walk out 6-1, 5-2.
The Watchmen, 5-2, which would put them at the same 5-2 as the
Animals. And the U would be 2.
The U.
But then don't we get the 3 versus the 6 and the 4 versus the 5?
No, it'd be the 1 versus 4, 2 versus 3.
Right.
And then for the BIC, they play the U, then they play the Omegas, then they play the Snow Tribe, the Animals, and then the Buzz. The U game, I think, is their toughest test for the rest of the season. And to be completely honest, they may go undefeated again. At worst, they may go 6-1. So right now, coming out of the Northeast, we might already have our playoff scenario. It may be BIC versus the Watchmen, the U versus the Animals.
And that's if chalk.
Here's my question: Can the Snow Tribe get 4 more wins? Can the Renegades, the Buzz, and the Omegas would have to run the table to get into the playoffs right now?
And that ain't happening.
And that's not conceivable. The Watchmen or the Animals have to fall down bad.
Isn't there that wild card round though in the East where the 3 and the 6 and the 4 and the 5 go?
Yeah, the 3 and the 6 and the 4 and the 5 would play, and
they would reseed. Who would be the 6 and the 5 then? Right?
Because if we're looking at it right now,
it would be.
Yeah, if we're looking at are we talking about right now or hypothetical?
Well, hypothetical. I think right now there's a lot of those teams are 0-2, but
So if we think 1 through 4 is going to stay the same
in the Northeast,
right? Yeah, so
we'd have to look at. We have 2 more spots to fill. Yeah, right now it's the Snow Tribe and the Renegades.
That's what I'm saying. It's really just the Snow Tribe and the Renegades, and what we'll see is either a Renegades Animals rematch, which I'm pretty sure everybody wants, and then we might see a Snow Tribe Watchmen kind of situation going. I'm not sure, because the Watchmen would be, if they lose to the U, they're the lower man on the totem pole out of that top 3. They'd be the 3. And
that Animals Renegades rematch.
Listen, I don't know. I don't know if I could call that game. I think I have to just go watch. And
right now,
I'll call it.
If the season ended today, it would be the BIC playing the Renegades and the Watchmen playing the Snow Tribe.
Yeah, but I think as we go on, Animals are undefeated. You got to beat them. You got to knock them off. And I don't think that we're ever going to pick the Animals over BIC this year. But we watch that game and we see Huff making interceptions and throwing touchdowns. Crazier things have happened in the A7FL for sure.
Crazy, way crazier.
So, and we're not even talking about the Nightcrawlers.
And Vegas would be interesting too, because if it's the same situation, we may see the Hunters play the Force and the Sick-Witted play the OTT. I think we know what those games would end up looking like.
Right.
But the BIC may have the best path to the championship of any team because they're so good, and you can put them. They've faced one of their, two of their toughest opponents. They're probably going to face their toughest opponent for the rest of the season next week. They can conceivably run the table. I think they lose against the BIC and then can run the table. The Animals, I have way more questions on, because they're going to be playing an eclectic group. They're not playing the Watchmen, but they are playing an eclectic group of players.
But I will say
this, next couple of weeks,
there is the elite teams, and when we talk about the top 10, we know who those are.
Right.
But I think the step down from the elite teams, there's a lot of teams fighting in that step down. So we could say things like, the Nightcrawlers are 5, or the Insomniacs or this and that. Really right now, based on what we've seen, BIC looks like who we thought they were. Right. And then there's a lot of teams that improved that are looking to prove even more. So, teams like the Animals, teams like the Insomniacs, including teams like the Nightcrawlers, which I don't think they can even prove anything to us. We were talking about this on the top 10. They can't prove anything to us until the Final Four. They can only disprove things, and they're put in a tough situation, but they're also put in a pretty decent situation. Hey, you got to take care of Florida, and then you're gonna have to beat the top team in the Northeast. And if they do that, then they might even be the favorite in the championship. But hey, even though it's only week 2, we got all these storylines brewing, guys. Enjoy Easter, because as soon as we get back, you better be ready, locked in. We're going to bring you some great football, great spring football.
I completely agree, and I think that's a great place to leave it off. We'll head on into the holiday. Be sure to get your merch, tinyurl.com/A7FL merch. That's tinyurl.com/A7FL merch. You can get shirts with all of our faces on them. And you can head over to tinyurl.com/A7FL merch. Support our sponsor, Skillshare. The link's right there on either side of me. Unless you're listening, you click the link in the description of the podcast. But we'll be back next week as we will break down the games for week 3 and whatever else drama that has popped up in the American Sevens Football League.
We're drama-free here, Matt.
What was that?
I said we're drama-free here, Matt.
Oh, yeah.
None of the three of us are dramatic at all.
If you love the Vanderpump Rules, you will love the American Sevens Football League. That is basically my opinion at this point. If you love pro football and pro wrestling, you are an A7FL fan in waiting. We will welcome you with open arms. But in your eyes, the light, the heat, your eyes, we feel complete as this show is complete. And we will say to you, as always, don't be an asshole.
I'll try.
I'll try.